that I want to be number one. Little did I know that I would,
It's hard to imagine that now because we're so far removed from it that it's almost hard.
Martina Navratilova does not get stunned easily. This is a woman who played professional tennis across 5 decades. She watched Steffi Graf dismantle opponents with mechanical precision. She watched Serena Williams physically redefine what a female athlete could be. She watched teenage prodigies arrive, dominate, collapse, and disappear more times than anyone can count. And yet, in 2025, in Madrid, a 20-year-old from the Philippines walked into a press conference and left her stunned.
Sí, cada vez que vengo aquí siento muy cómoda, siento en casa. Llevo muchos años aquí en España, pues nada.
The quote spreading across tennis circles right now, "I've never seen this." That quote is about Alex Eala, and it is specifically about the moment Eala opened her mouth and spoke in fluent Spanish, not haltingly, not with an apology for her accent, not reading from a prepared statement. Fluent, natural, conversational Spanish in one of the most watched press rooms on the clay court circuit.
Cada partido en este nivel es una lucha, es una batalla, pues estoy muy contento por eso.
Now ask yourself, why would a 5-decade veteran of this sport call that something she has never seen? The answer is not about language. It is about what the language represents. Subscribe right now. What this channel covers next is the part every mainstream outlet is completely ignoring. The real story behind that moment starts with a decision made when Eala was barely a teenager. She was 13 years old. That is how young Alex Eala was when her father Michael looked at his daughter and recognized something that Philippine tennis infrastructure at that time was simply not built to handle. She was already exceptional by local standards. Junior titles were accumulating. The raw talent was undeniable. But undeniable talent without the right environment around it does not grow. It stalls, it plateaus, and without elite daily competition forcing you to be better every single morning, it eventually quietly disappears.
Of course, we have to mention Alex Eala, the incredible fandom coming, across the globe, especially from the Filipino community.
So the family made a decision that most families would never seriously consider. They contacted the Rafa Nadal Academy in Manacor, Mallorca, a facility not in Madrid, not in Barcelona, but on an island off the Spanish coast, built entirely around the competitive philosophy of one of the greatest clay court players this sport has ever produced. Discipline as a daily practice, physical endurance pushed past comfortable limits, mental resilience treated as a skill to be trained, not a personality trait you either have or you do not. A culture so demanding that players who wash out of it still credit it years later for making them harder to break. Eala got in. She packed her bags, left Quezon City, and moved to Mallorca as a young teenager. No familiar peer group around her, no language she already knew filling every room, just Spanish, morning to night, in classrooms, at the dinner table, on the practice court, during film sessions, during recovery, during every unstructured hour in between. Spanish was not a subject on her schedule. It was the air she breathed inside the only environment available to her. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Adolescent immersion during the exact developmental window when the brain is most receptive to language acquisition does not just add vocabulary. It does not just install grammar rules. It rewires the way you process under pressure. It changes which language your mind reaches for first when your body is exhausted and a journalist is waiting for your answer and 20 cameras are pointed at your face, which is exactly why that Madrid press room reacted the way it did. A WTA 1000 post-match press conference is not a relaxed environment. You have just spent 2 hours making high-stakes decisions on clay against a professional opponent. Your muscles are spent, your nerves are still running at match intensity. Journalists in Madrid are largely Spanish-speaking, asking questions in a language that most players on tour either avoid entirely or manage with a few rehearsed phrases before retreating to English. Eala did not retreat. She answered directly, naturally, in full sentences, with the cadence of someone who stopped translating in her head years ago.
Sí, cada vez que vengo aquí siento muy cómoda, siento en casa. Llevo muchos años aquí en España, pues nada, cada partido en este nivel es una lucha, es una batalla, pues estoy muy contento por eso.
That was the moment the clip spread. That was the moment the reaction moved through tennis circles. And that was the specific moment Martina Navratilova was reportedly left stunned, saying, in words now circulating widely, that she had never seen this in all her decades around professional tennis. The Navratilova quote, "To be transparent with you," has spread, primarily through fan platforms and secondary sports media. A direct, time-stamped, on-camera source has not been nailed down by mainstream outlets. The sentiment is entirely believable, coming from someone with her background and her eye for the game. But the quote is the spark that lit the conversation, not the whole fire. And the fire burns fine without it, because what Eala actually did in that press room stands completely on its own. Here is where the timeline becomes impossible to ignore. In 2024, Eala won the WTA Guadalajara Open Akron, a WTA 250 tournament in Mexico. She moved through the draw, she won the title, and in doing so, she became the first Filipino tennis player in history, male or female, to win a WTA singles title. First. For a nation of over 100 million people whose relationship with this sport had always been emotional but never fully rewarded at the professional level, she was 19 years old when it happened. That win did not just move her ranking, it shifted something inside Philippine sports culture that statistics cannot fully capture. Tennis federations that had been cautiously optimistic started speaking in different terms. The story of a girl from Quezon City who left home as a teenager, trained in Spain, learned the language, absorbed the culture, and came back to the world stage as a champion, started reaching people who had never followed a WTA draw in their lives. By the time the 2025 clay court season arrived and Madrid opened its draw, Eala was not coming in as a feel-good story or a regional curiosity. She was arriving as a professional with a title, a developing ranking trajectory, and a game specifically constructed for surfaces exactly like the ones at the Caja Magica. Her ground strokes carry real weight. Her movement on clay is patient and positionally disciplined. She does not chase points she cannot win. She does not panic inside long rallies. She was built at the Nadal Academy, inside a culture that treats clay court tennis as a complete philosophy, not a surface you adapt to, but one you are trained to think through from the very beginning. Watching her play on clay in 2025 is watching a very specific and very long investment visibly paying off. The Spanish she speaks is inseparable from that same investment. You cannot spend the formative years of your athletic and personal development inside a Spanish institution, competing against Spanish-speaking training partners, being coached in Spanish, living inside a Spanish-speaking community on a Spanish island, and come out treating the language as something external to you. It becomes part of how you function, part of how you compete, part of the identity you carry into rooms like that Madrid press conference. So what that room heard was not a performance. It was not a prepared moment designed for social media. It was the audible evidence of a decade of compounding decisions. A 13-year-old who gave up a conventional life at home, who sat in Mallorcan classrooms doing drills in a language she was still learning, who trained alongside players from across Europe and South America, while her peers back in the Philippines grew up together without her. She paid for that fluency in years, not in lessons. The tennis conversation around Eala in 2025 is no longer about potential. Potential is what you discuss before someone wins. She has won. The conversation now is about ceiling, about how far a game still visibly developing can actually travel, about whether the mental and physical foundation laid at the Nadal Academy is strong enough to carry her into the upper reaches of the WTA rankings on a consistent basis. Elite coaches who watch her closely will tell you the components are there. The physical conditioning from years inside one of the most demanding academies in the sport is visible in how she recovers between points and between matches. The tactical discipline shows up in shot selection under pressure, in the decisions she makes late in tight sets rather than early in comfortable ones. And the composure, the Madrid press conference is a genuine data point for this. is not something she is manufacturing. It is something she has had long enough that it looks natural. Composure cannot be faked in front of journalists who have spent careers watching athletes unravel under far less. Eala sat in that chair and she did not manage the room, she inhabited it. In Spanish. Fully present, fully confident, completely unbothered by the fact that she was a 20-year-old from Southeast Asia conducting herself in a European press room in the local language while the world watched. Navratilova spent 5 decades watching players walk into rooms exactly like that one. She knows what preparation looks like from the outside. She knows the difference between a player performing composure and a player who genuinely has it. Her reaction, stunned and reportedly saying she had never seen this, is not surprise at the language itself. It is recognition of something rarer. A player who absorbed a foreign culture so completely that it became part of her competitive foundation. Not an accessory, a foundation. That is uncommon at any level of professional sport. The tennis media is still figuring out how to frame Eala because she does not fit a recognizable template. She is not from the American pipeline. She is not European. She did not come through the Eastern European academies that have produced the majority of top 10 women's players across the last 2 decades. She is Filipino, formed in Spain, competing in a sport with a historically narrow geography of champions, and she is winning inside it. And winning in a way that is starting to make other players notice. Not just fans, not just journalists, players. The locker room is a different kind of barometer than social media or press coverage. Players do not perform admiration for cameras. They either respect your game or they do not. The fact that Eala is being discussed inside that environment by players who have been on tour far longer than her, who have seen dozens of promising young athletes arrive and fade before delivering on anything, says something that no ranking number fully captures. She carries herself on court the way players twice her age carry themselves after winning multiple titles. There is no visible desperation in her game, no panicked shot selection when a set slips away, no body language that signals she believes she is somewhere she does not belong. That psychological grounding is rare. It is rare in veterans. It is almost unheard of in someone still navigating the first years of a professional career at the highest level of the sport. The Nadal Academy did not just give her Spanish and clay court footwork, it gave her a competitive identity that is already settled, already formed, already hers. Most players spend their entire careers searching for that kind of internal stability and never quite finding it. Eala walked into Madrid in 2025 with it already in place, already visible, already making legends stop and say they had never seen anything quite like it before. That is what was actually in the room that day. Not just a language, a player who knows exactly who she is. That combination makes certain parts of the established tennis conversation reach instinctively for the novelty framing. The first Filipino this, the unexpected that, the surprise qualifier followed by the grudging acknowledgement. What gets lost in that framing is the quality of the player being discussed. Eala is not a novelty act. She is a serious professional with a serious game who made serious sacrifices over a serious number of years to arrive exactly where she is standing right now. The Madrid moment spread because it was visually arresting. A young woman from the Philippines, in one of the most watched press rooms on the clay court tour, speaking the language of the country with total ease. But the people who stopped at the visual missed everything underneath it. The 13-year-old decision, the years in Mallorca, the isolation, the immersion, the title in Guadalajara, the game built for clay, the composure that does not arrive without cost. And the cost was real. There were no shortcuts taken, no privileged pathway handed to her because of where she came from or who her family knew. Every ranking point she holds right now was earned inside matches where nobody was expecting her to win. Every press conference she walks into with that kind of composure was preceded by years of walking into rooms where she was the outsider, the unknown, the girl from a country tennis had mostly ignored. She converted every single one of those moments into fuel. Navratilova was stunned. The room went quiet. The clip moved across the internet. And underneath all of that noise, the actual story of how Alex Eala became the first Filipino to win a WTA title is still asking for the depth of coverage it has always deserved. This channel exists to give it that coverage. If this video told you something the mainstream tennis conversation is leaving out, and you already know whether it did, subscribe now. Hit the notification bell. Every video on this channel goes past the headline, follows the thread that other channels drop, and gives you the context that makes the story make sense. Eala is 20 years old. The clay season is not finished. The ranking is still climbing. And this story has not reached its most important chapter yet.